जाति नीति कुल गोत्र दूरगम नाम रूप गुण दोष वर्जितम देश काल विषयातिवर्त्य यद ब्रह्म तत्त्वमसि भावयात्मनि। स्वराज्य साम्राज्य विभूतिरेषा भवत्कृपा श्रीमहिमप्रसादात् प्राप्ता मया श्रीगुरवे महात्मने। नमो नमस्तेस्तु पुनर्नमोस्तु। नमो नमस्तेस्तु पुनर्नमोस्तु। नमो नमस्तेस्तु पुनर्नमोस्तु। नमस्तस्मै सदैकस्मै कस्मै चिन्महसे नमः। यदेतद्विश्वरूपेण राजते गुरुराजते। यदेतद्विश्वरूपेण राजते गुरुराजते। Hari Om Tat Sat. See, whenever the chapters are more to do with philosophy, I have a problem because most of the people are not interested so much in philosophy. They would like to know something about sadhana. So, to relate everything to sadhana is not at all easy. It can anything be related if we study the philosophy, ruminate on it, introspect on it properly, then it becomes sadhana. But people find it difficult to relate. So we have the responsibility of how it actually helps in sadhana. Now the purpose, the speciality of Bhagavad Gita is that, as I said that earlier also, it is always exhorting us not to leave all actions and go and discover the divinity in solitude. Well, going to the solitude to discover the divinity might be necessary in the beginning. But Bhagavad Gita's final aim is to make our life divinized, to divinize our life with all its interactions. So as I said earlier, that generally in Upanishadic study and contemplation, the activities are regarded as hindrance. People, those who have completely renounced worldly activities, they pursue it. Whereas Bhagavad Gita is particularly meant to give us the same result by transforming our attitude with which we do the activities. The activities, anything, whatever we do in any field, we will continue to do. But rather than becoming a hindrance, those activities themselves will become an instrument for liberation. That is, rather than becoming a hindrance, we will utilize the activities as instruments for liberation by changing our attitude with which we are doing the activities. For example, as in the Karmakanda of Vedas, the Yajna was performed with the sole aim of fulfilling some desire, either to get children or to get kingdom or to go to heaven after the body falls. So it is all with desireful orientation. Yajna was meant to be performed with desireful orientation. Of course, the purpose was different. It was designed in a manner that when you do, you will undergo certain changes in your mind. But basically it was like that. Whereas in Bhagavad Gita, the concept of Yajna is absolutely opposite to that. Whatever we do, if we can renounce the desireful gain, the aim for the desireful gain, if you can eliminate that, then any action becomes jajna. Very simply, everything we do, the ultimate purpose is that by doing this, I will get this, by that I will have this, I will have this. But what is the final result or phala? It is that I will become happy, is it not? Whatever we do, many things will be the output or result, but the final output we look for is by that I will become happy. But we never become happy by doing anything. Happy means permanently happy. If we permanently become happy, thereafter we will not have any insufficiency, any abhava bodha. We will be fulfilled. But nobody has ever become fulfilled by gaining anything from the world, be it riches, fame or anything. But we don't really meditate and contemplate on this fact. So we still remain deluded about it. But when we do any activity, not putting our aim at the last point that I will become happy by doing this, which we know that we will not become. So why aim at that? If we remove that, then we will find that we do everything out of joy. Being happy, we will do whatever to be done. Whatever actions come, we will do. Because it is the anxiety of whether I will be successful and become happy, or whether I will fail and become unhappy. That anxiety keeps away the joy, which is our natural coordinate. Joy is the natural coordinate of our soul. Whenever we become natural, without any desire, we automatically become blissful. When our mind is free of all desires, then we become blissful. Then we become happy, really happy. So how can we, if we can eliminate that carrot, as I say, carrot of happiness in front, and do whatever to be done with full attention, full spirit, we will become happy. We don't have to look for the happiness at the end of the product, at the end of the job. So this is the greatness of Bhagavad Gita, that all our activities will become joyful and they will be utilized for purifying our being, because unless we get into the activities, there is no opportunity to know where we have the ashuddhi, where we have the impurities. All our interactions will point out where we lack, what are the defects and impurities we suffer from. So there is a scope of removing all the impurities, and by gradually becoming purer, finally we become the self. The self is nothing but the pinnacle of purity, where there is no fragmentation, no desire, nothing. So gradually we become that. But this gradual becoming is a very foolproof becoming, because there is no chance of falling in that case. But suppose with the impurities in mind, you attain some experience of Atma Sakshatkara or anything of that sort, it will not be foolproof. If you get back to the world, again there will be trouble. But in this case, what happens is that your interactions with the world becomes free of ragadvesha. I have explained earlier also. Ragadvesha viyuktaistu vishayan indriyescharan atmavashair vidheyatma prasadam adhigachati. So one who is free, who has freed his mind from the ragadvesha, means clinging to what I like and hating what I dislike. This is in short the ragadvesha. Such a person, if he interacts with the world with his senses as he was doing earlier, when he is free of ragadvesha, then he will interact with the same world, but not being slave to the world. Generally, we are interacting with the world, but we are slave to the world. The moment something is not to our favor, not desirable, we get disturbed. And when it is favorable also, we get elated. Both are disturbances. So, when we are freed of the ragadvesha, then we interact in the same world with the same sense organs and same body, same mind, remaining unaffected by the world. So we get prasada. Prasada means the placidity of the mind, which will be there in suffering as well as happiness, which will be there in sukha as well as dukkha. Neither we will be elated in sukha, but we will be happy. Nor we will be depressed in dukkha. So this aim of Bhagavad Gita is very great. And it is so clearly, distinctly, and elaborately presented through the chapters that it has become the unique grantha of the world, and it will become more and more of the world. Even now it has not become, even in our country, they don't introduce into the academic level, or so much of opposition is there. When other countries introduce, perhaps we will start doing it. So, in Bhagavad Gita, generally Shankaracharya has divided, whether it is Shankaracharya or Madhusudana Saraswati, I am not sure, into 3 sections. The first 6 chapters are generally Karma Yoga. From 7th to 12th is believed to be Bhakti Yoga, and 13th to 18th is believed to be the Jnana Yoga. But that might be a very broad classification. Actually, it is all mixture of everything everywhere, except first chapter. All other chapters are mixture of everything everywhere. But there will be a certain predominance of a certain quality. So this division has got some meaning, but not fully. Really speaking, Bhagavad Gita is a great synthesis. You cannot isolate, this is Karma Yoga, this is Bhakti Yoga, this is Jnana Yoga, like that. That is the speciality of Bhagavad Gita. It's a grand synthesis of everything. Not only this, synthesis of Raja Yoga, all kinds. Everything has been synthesized here. And the Karma Yoga itself, which we say that Bhagavad Gita is Karma Yoga, Bhagavad Gita itself is saying that it is Bhakti, it is Buddhi Yoga. That means it is not just doing karma. To have the yoga attitude in the mind, it is all depending on our buddhi. So where he has explained that I have told you, Arjuna, about the jnana, sankhya, everything I have told. The sankhya buddhi, that means the knowledge of sankhya. Now I will tell you the yoga buddhi, by which you can easily get rid of all the bondage that the karmas are creating. Your actions, they are all producing bondage for you. So this knowledge of the yoga, which Bhagavad Gita is presented, this will allow you to do everything remaining free, rather creating freedom for you. Whatever you will do, it will make you more and more, take you more and more towards freedom, towards liberation. But the whole approach to yoga will depend on the buddhi, because you have to eliminate that happiness gain of it, that by doing this, finally I will become happy. That phalatyaga is essential. Phalatyaga does not mean rejecting the objective result. It is absolute misunderstanding. Objective result cannot be renounced. If you walk towards CIRD, you should normally, if you are walking that proper way, you will reach CIRD. After reaching, there is no question of rejecting the result. Anything external is following its causal chain. It will happen. So the phalatyaga Bhagavad Gita is talking about, it is within. Anything Bhagavad Gita speaks about, everything is to do with our mind. Sannyasa, it is not the external sannyasa, it is the internal sannyasa. The Naishkarmya Siddhi in Bhagavad Gita, it is absolutely internal. When you gain the knowledge of akartritva and abhoktritva, non-doership and non-enjoyership, when it gets actualized, then you attain Naishkarmya. So everything in Bhagavad Gita is internal. So the result also is about the internal result, that we are expecting something, that expectation has to be dealt with. Now in doing it, the 13th chapter is the first chapter of Jnana section, to say. 13th, 14th we have already done here, the last 2 years. Now sequentially we have taken up 15th. Now in the 13th chapter, what they dealt with, the name was Kshetra, Kshetrajna, vibhaaga yoga. Kshetra, Kshetrajna, vibhaaga yoga. That means Kshetra is the body or the field, we say. And Kshetrajna is the knower of the field. That was the discussion there. In spirituality, you will find all these yogas are viveka. We call it viveka. Viveka means discrimination, distinguishing. Various names are given, but in the end, they are all same. They are approached through different path. For example, Atma Anatma Viveka. Atma Anatma Viveka. That means what is that I and what is not the I. What is who am I and what is not I. That means body we are generally thinking to be I, but no, I am the observer of the body, I am the knower of the body. So body is not Atma. Atma is the I who is unchanging. That is everywhere this Viveka means Nitya Nitya Vastu Viveka. That means Nitya and Anitya you have to discriminate. Whatever is permanent, we have to distinguish from the impermanent changing things. In this case, I am seeing the body which was small earlier, 50 years ago, which is changing, becoming big, becoming old, becoming this, becoming that. So the body is changeful, but I, the observer of the body, who is noticing and who is knowing the changes, he is unchanging. Similarly, mind is changeful, but I am seeing the mind, I am not changing. Always it is a distinction of the changeful and the unchangeful. In some cases it will be in another manner, Chit Jada Viveka. That what is the consciousness and what is the inert. Jada means object. In English you can say subject object Viveka. What is the subject and what is the object? You will find everything is in the objectude. Only the seer of the knower of the objectude, that is I, that is the alone, not object. Similarly, there will be Drik Drishya Viveka. There is a book of Shankaracharya, seer and seen. Now, there also you will distinguish that the body is a seen element, the mind is the seen element, the emotional, whatever thoughts are playing, they are all seen. So, like that, everywhere we have to discriminate between what is the permanent and what is the changeful element. And the important aspect of is that everywhere we will have to identify our I or our identity with the non-changing element. There lies the key. What is the purpose? Sadhana related thing here. That when we associate ourselves with the non-changing element, then all the troubles of this changeful world is gone. We are not affected by it. This is the gain we have from the philosophy. That is, why are we suffering? Why are we troubled by the world? Because we are identifying ourselves with the changing elements. When you identify yourself with the non-changing element, then you become the substratum of the whole universe where all the changeful games are going on. Everything is changing, everything is good, bad, everything is there. But I am not affected by anything. They are all taking place in me. Just like the Shakti dance, underneath Shiva is lying calm. That Kali Murti we worship generally, there Shiva is lying below. And above that, Kali is dancing. Kali is the representation of the universal energy. That everywhere there is change, everywhere there is motion, there is construction, there is destruction, there is birth, there is death. All these are under the Shakti. That Shakti is born of Shiva only, born of the Purusha alone. But the Purusha on which the Shakti is dancing, he never changes by anything. He lies as it is shown in the Murti. It is a replica of just to make us aware of this is the truth. So what happens is that once we associate with the Shiva, with the unchanging element, then everything becomes auspicious to us. Shiva means auspiciousness because of that. Even if it is a death, if it is a destruction, that also is auspicious. Because without death, there cannot be birth. Without death, there cannot be life. Without destruction, there cannot be creation. It is a continuous process of everything. So, Bhagavad Gita's purpose is first through these discriminations, first they identify what is that non-changing element. But we don't stop there. Then we have to know that this changing element is only a It is taking place on the substratum of the non-changing element. It is not only substratum, it is nothing but the non-changing element. That is, the whole universe is a play in the consciousness alone. So by that what will happen? If you go only up to the first step, then you would like to leave the world and always remain in the non-changing element, which you can attain only in meditation. In meditation you can go there, in samadhi you go there and you become the kutastha, that means non-changing element. But when you are working, you have to be associated with the body, mind, everything. The mind has to think whatever you are doing. So until you find that there is nothing but the truth, nothing but Atma, nothing but Brahman, nothing but consciousness, all changeful activities will disturb your settlement. You will get unsettled. You will become not self-seated. You lose your self-seatedness in activity. Only when you don't miss that Atma, that non-changing element, even in your activity, whatever you do throughout the day, then only you will be self-seated while working also. Is it clear? This is the purpose of Bhagavad Gita. So first, that vibhaaga is distinguishing the non-changing element from the changeful element. Then it is establishing that the changeful is nothing but only appearing in the non-changing element. This appearance I have explained to you quite a few days, over the last few days, that the whole universe is only appearing in consciousness. It is like written in the air. You write on the air a table and an elephant, God, dog. It is all air alone. In the space, if you write, it is space alone. Like that, here everything is written in the consciousness. But this knowledge has to be actualized. Then only it will work. Otherwise, when you are active, you will again forget that. You cannot always remember, no, I am consciousness, that is only consciousness. That way you cannot do. So this has to be a first-hand discovery and knowledge, a complete actualized knowledge to have its full effect. But whatever little we do, some benefit will be there. Suppose normally you are not, but at least when you are getting disturbed, you can get back to that consciousness. And you will be able to, the more and more you are able to identify yourself with that non-changing Atma or soul, you will be able to win over the circumstances. Normally, we are slave to the circumstances because of this identity with the object. With the objective elements, we are always identified. So, the moment there is something which we do not like, we get upset about it. But when we disassociate ourselves from that, our identity from that, we will be able to take all the troubles of the world, at least after contemplating and looking back and thinking back. Now in Kshetra, Kshetrajna, vibhaaga yoga in 13th chapter, he has explained that this Purusha is actually the Kshetrajna. I have explained earlier also. Initially he started with the knower of the body is the Kshetrajna. So that everybody will think that I am the knower of the body, there is nothing special about it. So I am the Kshetrajna. But then immediately he says that I am the Kshetrajna in all the beings. There we have trouble, that I am the Kshetrajna only in my body. How can I become the Kshetrajna in all the beings? So naturally the inquiry will be there. That is the purpose of the 13th chapter, to solve that dilemma or the doubt through that process. And there another great thing he has introduced is that he said that one who has understood the Kshetra and Kshetrajna is a jnani. That is called jnana. Then he has enumerated 20 qualities. Amanitvam, madammitvam, ahimsa, kshantirajyavam, acharyopasanam. All those things, 20 qualities he has enumerated and said that etad jnanam iti proktam. Ajnanam yadatonyatha. This assembly of the 20 qualities is called knowledge, and everything else is ignorance. That means when we have these 20 qualities in full, or to a reasonable extent at least, then we should have the benefit of the knowledge that I am the Kshetrajna in all. I have shown clearly one after another, taking one after another these virtues of the 20 qualities, that each, when it is taken to its pinnacle, it takes us to the final impersonal level, that we visualize the whole universe without any personal preference and prejudice. That is what is the meaning. That our ego gets dissolved. All those qualities, that amanitvam, adhammitvam, the pinnacle of that is the dissolution of the ego, dissolution of doership and enjoyership. And all these qualities, the pinnacle is that jajna, that I am witness of the whole universe. As the whole universe, tremendous activities are going on. In that, my body, mind, personality, whatever it is made of, whatever work it has to be done, it has to do, it is going on doing that. That is having a sky-like impersonality, from where you find your body is also active in the world and doing its whatever to be done. That special artificial ego, I am doing, I have done this, I have to do this, all these things are gone. So all those qualities mean that. So these qualities are a regular practical way of actualizing this impersonality slowly. And what is that impersonality? It is taking us closer and closer to the self, to the soul, what it is actually, our real identity. That means the affectation will come down. As close as we go to the soul, to our real identity, we will not be affected by the world. Now in 14th chapter, he came down further to give us a model with which we can actually work for this attainment. This impersonality, to have this impersonality, in the 14th chapter, he has taken the 3 guna model. It is called Gunatraya vibhaaga yoga. Gunatraya means 3 guna. Gunatraya vibhaaga yoga. There, why it is more practical? Because he has defined each guna, their quality. When it increases or it is leading us, then what are the behavior we have, what are the thoughts we have, everything in terms of the 3 guna. So it is not only with 14th chapter. When I took the 14th chapter, I took it along with 18th chapter. Because this Gunatraya, some part of it comes in the 18th chapter also. Say, knowledge is also 3 kinds. Sattvika jnana, Rajasika jnana, Tamasika jnana. Dhruti, 3 kinds. Sattvika dhruti, Rajasika dhruti, Tamasika dhruti. Like that, buddhi, sukha, everything is of 3 categories. And those are discussed in detail in the 18th chapter. So we have to study the 14th chapter with the 18th chapter if we want to have a comprehensive idea. Now, there he has explained clearly that the whole Prakriti is a combined function of these 3 gunas. Always the 3 gunas will be there. There cannot be when one of these gunas is not there. In creation, all these 3 gunas will be active. But some will be at the upper, some will be at the lower. According to that will be the differences. Similarly, in Bhagavad Gita, that is generally 3 guna tattva for Prakriti. But Bhagavad Gita has mainly analyzed it, our personality, in terms of these 3. That is where Sattva guna is prominent, where Rajoguna is prominent, where Tamoguna is prominent. And he has analyzed the ahara also, food or all kinds of intake, discussing the effect on our body, that if you take what kind of food, the body will have the sattvika gunas. Those food will be sattvic food. By food means not only through the mouth, it is true of everything, from the vision, through the eyes, the sound through the ears. We have to focus on what is the effect on our personality. Not on the, suppose one food can be sattvika for one person, but for another person, if that food causes lot of gas and acidity, then it is not sattvika for him, because it will not be sthira. He says, sthira hridya, rasya snigdha sthira hridya ahara sattvika priyaha. So, depending on what is the effect produced on our being, we have to find out which activity is sattvika for me, which food is sattvika for me, which food is rajasic for me. And you can choose accordingly. So that you can have, by just adjusting your life, your surroundings, your clothes, your drawing room arrangement, your friends you are interacting with, everything. By adjusting your circumstances, you can increase the sattva guna in your body, in your being. So the sadhana becomes very practical. And he has finally said that how a knower, that is, when we identify ourselves with the self, how remaining in the field of the guna activities, he remain transcendental. That means he is no more affected by the bondage created by the gunas. So he has defined there what are the bondages created by sattva guna, what are the bondages created by rajoguna, what are the bondages created by tamoguna, and finally how to get over that. That was the 14th chapter. So Gunatita means, again, when you have attained that impersonality level, as you did in 13th chapter also by the Kshetra Kshetrajna vibhaaga yoga. Here also, by understanding the guna elements and transcending the bondages of them, by overcoming the bondages. Bondage means slavery. So when you have overcome the bondages created by all the three gunas, you are free of the slavery. You become master of the world, master of yourself. That means you become free of the affectation. You can deal with anything. You can work, be active in the world, remaining anchored in the soul. So there, in the end of 14th chapter, I will just read, because we are going to 15th chapter. Whenever we go to a chapter, we should see where he has left it in the previous chapter. To understand Bhagavad Gita, we have to do that. Many places we have to go to the something you are finding that contradictory, it is not clear, etc. Go to in response to which question of Arjuna he is speaking. What is the context of the discussion? Then you will get the answer there. So here, after defining who is a Gunatita person, he is saying, 14th chapter, 26th and 27th verse, the last two verses. Mam cha yo yaha abhyavicharena bhakti yogena sevate sa gunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Brahmano hi pratishtha aham amritasya avyayasya cha shashvatasya cha dharmasya sukhasya aikantikasya cha. These are the two last statements. We can chant the 26th. Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. See, this is why we say that Bhagavad Gita is a grand synthesis. Suddenly he has brought in Bhakti Yoga. It was not that 12th chapter he has completed Bhakti Yoga. After talking about Gunatita and all, he has described who is a Gunatita. But to become a Gunatita, he has brought in Bhakti Yoga. What is he saying? Mam cha yaha abhyabhicharena bhakti yogena. It is not only Bhakti Yoga. Avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate. Who worships me or has his attitude towards me. What kind of attitude? Avyabhicharini bhakti. Bhakti means undesultory bhakti. It is not sometimes when the God is giving me good things, I am very devoted, and when something bad comes, oh God, why did He do it? It is not like that. Whatever happens to us, we will be thinking in the same manner. It is given by God. He is all-knowing. He is all-powerful. So whatever happens to my life, it is given by God. So truly speaking, the Bhakti Yoga means surrender. What is the meaning of surrender? The God which you have not seen, you have not known at all, you don't know whether He is there or not, how can you surrender to Him? Surrender means acceptance. That means whatever comes to you, you cannot have any complaint at all. If you have lost your property, lost your job, lost your relatives, then also you cannot have any complaint. You have to accept it. Then you do whatever to gain back the property. You can work, you can marry again, you can have children again. Anything can be done. But you have to accept the situation, what has happened. There also we are generally foolish. When the situation has happened, what can you do by not accepting? But all our stress is because of the non-acceptance. Suppose somebody has lost everything and he is howling and crying, why Lord, why it has happened to me, why it is not happening to others also, you may say, if he is so selfish. So he is saying like that. By that saying, is there any purpose? It has already happened. Providentially it has happened. That he is undergoing so much of torture, stress, it is because of his non-acceptance of the situation. Do you understand this? If you accept the situation, then immediately all stress, all tension, everything will go. You will be absolutely at ease. And then you will be able to do much better also to recover, if at all it is needed. But the whole thing is coming from a foolishness of non-acceptance. So surrender means acceptance. Accepting anything from anybody, anytime, anywhere in the world. और भी लगा सकते हैं 3-4 यानी. So it is the surrender which is taking you finally to the Gunatita. The Bhagavata in the 11th chapter has expressed it very well. That how a person transcends finally, goes upward and transcends finally. It is Shloka 11.25.34 and 35 in Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th Skanda, 25th chapter, 34th and 35th verse. He says, Nissango mam bhaved vidvan apramatto jitendriyaha rajmaschabhijayet sattvasam sevaya munihi. He says that a munihi, a thoughtful person, anybody, a sadhak will have to be thoughtful. He cannot just go on japa with the mala, then no progress will happen. It is like ants crawling, some mark will be there, that's all. At least that time your mind will be a little different. But that also is not there. When we do the mala japa, we go on shouting at people, and so that will not work. But at least if you do it concentrated mind, that much little benefit will be there. But you have to do manana. The real result comes from manana. The mantra word means manana trayate iti. In the previous series I have already explained. Manana trayate iti mantraha. That means whatever the mantra means, unless we meditate on that, unless we ruminate on that, unless we focus on the bhava of that mantra, we will not have the benefit. And only the meaning thinking will not do. We have to have an emotional association with the meaning of the mantra. This is very important. That is why we are not able to progress in sadhana. The progress will be as fast as much you have the emotional association with it. If you have an intense emotional association, then it will be taking you by storm. You will swiftly go. All the full driving force comes from our emotion. Now he says that the Muni, how does he get over the Rajas and Tamas bondages? Nissango mam bhajed vidvan apramatto jitendriyaha. These are the initial discipline that you go to some seclusion, at least not in the marketplace, a little seclusion. And apramattaha means he has to leave the pramada. This whatever I am saying, that doing japa and mind goes here and there, these are all pramada. Pramada means inattention. When we are doing bhajan, we are thinking of meditation or thinking of the Annakshetra. When we are in Annakshetra, we are thinking of meditation. And in meditation, we are thinking of walking, whatever. So this is called inattention in everything. Whatever we are doing, we have to be attentive to that. So when we are doing the bhajana for Lord also, we have to be attentive to whatever we are doing, what the mind is thinking, what the intelligence is doing, what is the emotional aspect there, what is the bodily aspect. Everything we have to be attentive. Now by incorporating more and more of sattva guna, he wins over the rajoguna and tamoguna bondages. That is, normally he will be under the clutch of rajoguna and tamoguna. Rajoguna means egoistic, divisional approach, always thinking in a narrow line, no comprehensive idea. Tamoguna means everything is understood in the reverse manner because of lethargy and inertia of the mind. That inertia will be there in the body and mind also. So when the intelligence has to function, it will take whatever comes to it, easily associated with the body mind, lethargy and all. So it is generally the always ulta, reverse understanding. So these two have to be overcome by sattva guna, which means sattva guna is defined as prakasha. That means enlightenment, jnana, knowledge. So by cultivating, and as such rajoguna and tamoguna are automatically, rajoguna will dominate over tamoguna. Suppose you cultivate rajoguna, then the lethargy will go, because rajoguna represents energy. So by cultivating a little of rajoguna, your tamoguna, you can overcome. That is why Vivekananda used to say that in our country at that time, now also all the more perhaps, the young boys, they should play football rather than meditating or doing any japa. It is true of others also. They should work rather than doing japa. So that the tamoguna is overcome. Once the tamoguna is overcome by rajoguna, both rajoguna and tamoguna will be overcome by cultivating more and more of sattva guna. How? Tamoguna inertia will be dealt with by, he says, lobha pravrittir arambha karmanam ashamaspriha rajasyetani jayante vivriddhe bharatashava aprakasho apravrittischa pramado moha evacha tamasyetani jayante vivriddhe kurunandana sarvadvareshu dehesmin prakasha upajayate jnanam yada tada vidyat vivriddham sattvam ityuta. These are the statements. So alasya and nidra, these are the tamoguna properties. So cultivating knowledge, and knowledge means sattvaguna is a comprehensive knowledge. Rajoguna is fragmented knowledge. It's a ragadvesha oriented knowledge. So by comprehensive knowledge, cultivation of comprehensive knowledge, more and more imbibing sattvaguna, we can win over the rajoguna and tamoguna. Then in the next, he is saying, sattvam cha abhijayed yuktaha nairapekshena shantadhihi sampadyate gunair mukto jivo jivam vihayamam. He says, sattvam cha abhijayet yuktaha. See, in Sattvaguna they have said that the Sattvaguna bondage is Sukha Sangena Badnati Jnana Sangena Chanaga. This Sattvika Sukha also is a bondage. Sukha is always a bondage. In Sattvaguna, the Sukha will be Sattvika. Also the Jnana will be Sattvika. But those two also will create bondage. Because he will try, always like to revel in the comprehensiveness, in the knowledge of the soul, knowledge of reality and all that. When there is a need to repair the tap or so, you will not like to get up at all. You will like to, why they are disturbing me. If somebody has come to see, you will not like to get up. I am now deep in the study. How can I go out and meet? All these problems will come from, that is also a bondage. Swamiji said that one day he was deep in meditation and somebody from the village came to see him. And he was finding it very difficult to go and meet him. Finally he did. He went and met. But he said that day I stopped my meditation. That why should I have done enough of it. And it has become a addiction for me. He himself says that I was a meditation monger. He used the language. We generally say that don't use that language, but he says that. And he was so attached to it that he thought that I am so attached to it that I am not able to do whatever to be done. So that day he decided and left. Thereafter he has meditated for others, not for him. That is sitting for initiation or meditating, that is different, but not for himself. So it also creates a bondage, which how it is to be overcome? He says, Sattvam cha abhijayet yuktaha. A yuktaha means a person who is connected to the Lord. Nairapekshena shantadhihi. By nirapeksha. Nirapeksha means non-expectation. That means accepting everything. Here, that is why I have quoted this. Accepting everything. Nirapeksha means non-expectation, not expecting anything from anywhere, anytime, anybody. Sampadyate gunair mukta. Then what happens? He has already got over the bondage of the tamoguna and rajoguna by cultivating sattva guna. Now he gets over the bondage created by sattva guna also. So he becomes a gunatita. Sampadyate gunair muktaha. He becomes liberated from the clutch of the bondage created by all the three gunas. The three gunas will play in him. As long as the body is there, the three gunas will play in his personality. But he will not be under the clutch or slavery of any of the product of the gunas, sukha or knowledge or anything. What happens? Sampadyate gunair muktaha. Gunair muktaha jivam vihaya jivaha mam sampadyate. This sampadyate is mam sampadyate. That means jivam vihaya, jivaha jivam vihaya mam sampadyate. This is a very good sentence. Jivaha jivam vihaya mam sampadyate. When we are saying jivaha, we are referring to our small identity. That I am body-mind limited soul. That small identity. So when we are jiva, jivam vihaya means that jivatvam vihaya. Vihaya means renouncing. That means when we, as a small identity associated with the body-mind personality, leave our limitedness, leave our jivatva, and mam sampadyate, he becomes one with me. Now Krishna is one who has identified himself with the universal identity, the soul. Whenever Krishna says mam sampadyate, attaining Krishna, it means actually attaining his real identity. So not that Krishna is living now to you get fused into his body. It is not like that. Krishna is one who has identified himself with the universal identity. So whenever anybody identifies with Krishna means he also identifies with the universal identity. So he has given the last message that by overcoming Sattvaguna also, we have to overcome the bondage created by Sattvaguna also. And that we can do by absolute surrender, which means nothing but acceptance of everything that is happening. Or nirapeksha. That means not expecting anything. Bhagavatam says also, Nairapeksham munim shantam nirvairam samadarshanam anubrajamyaham nityam puyetyanghrirenuvihi. Krishna is saying, Nairapeksham munim shantam nirvairam samadarshanam anubrajamyaham nityam puyetyanghrirenuvihi. He says that a devotee who is non-expecting, Nairapeksham, a muni who is nairapeksham, non-expecting. I follow him, not the devotee follows me. I follow him so that I can purify myself with the dust of his feet. Krishna is saying that such a devotee I follow so that I can purify myself with the dust of his feet. Why the author has written like this? to give this Nirapeksha the highest position, that even God follows such a person. That means Nirapeksha is the highest quality we can think of. So here also Krishna said that the 14th chapter, last but one verse, he says, Mam cha yo yaha abhyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate. One who practices unswavering bhakti yoga towards me, by that, sa gunan samatityaitan. Atitya means transcending. And samatityaitan means samyak atitya. That means transcending very well, samyak. Transcending very well, Brahma bhuyaya kalpate. He attains the Brahman. So with that we are coming to now the 15th chapter. That is, he has talked about the three gunas and how we can overcome the gunas, and by that what are we attaining? The ultimate Brahman we are attaining. Saying Ashwatham urdhva moolam adhashakam ashwatham prahuhu avyayam. It is avyaya, means it is, although it is changeful, but it is changeless also. How? The whole universe as a whole is undergoing change, but still the universe remains. It is anadi. Actually it is ananta also time-wise. But we say it is saanta because by knowledge it goes. That is in another sense, internal sense. Otherwise it is anadi ananta abhyaya. That time is within the universe. You cannot say that universe started in such and such time. If you say that, then time was already existing. How can time exist when there is no creation? When did the Big Bang happen? The creation started. Can you say time was not there? Time was not there is a wrong statement, because time is cyclical. Time was not there means I am actually referring to some time when time was not there. Is it not? These are all fallacious statements. Time, causality, duality, all these are in the ken of delusion. They are all cyclic. That is why in our literature, time is not linear. In science we think of time as linear, but our people 10,000 or 20,000 years ago also knew that time is cyclical, because they knew that the absolute truth is beyond causality. The causality is only an apparential creation. So time, causality, space, matter, everything is within the ken of duality. So he says that Chandamsi yasya paranani. When Chandamsi, it's plural, we refer to the Vedas generally. Vedas are called Chandas. That the Vedas are the leaves, yasya paranani. This Ashwatha Vriksha, Vedas are the limbs. Yastam Veda sa Vedavid. One who knows this Ashwatha tree, he is a knower of the Vedas. He is a knower. Second one, he says, I will come back again with the deeper meaning. Adhaschordhvam prasitas tasya shakha. It is not only the branches has come down, some of the branches have gone upward also. Both way it has gone. Adha cha urdhvam prasitas tasya shakha. The branches have gone on downward as well as upward. Guna pravriddhaha vishaya prabalaha. That the fruits of the tree, they are called prabalaha. They are all guna pravriddhaha. That is, they are following the gunas of prakriti. They are following the karma, the causality. By that, they are all generated everywhere. They are all following the causal chain. Adhascha mulani anusantatani. Now, he is saying that downward also the mulas, the roots are going down. When will it happen? Generally it will happen in a banyan tree, not so much in an ashwatha tree. It happens in ashwatha, but very few with the trunk. In banyan tree, you have the secondary roots going down. So in this case, the secondary roots are coming down. Original root is going upward. He says, the secondary roots are coming down. Adhasya mulani anusantatani karmanubandhini manushya loke. They are all related by the bondage of karma. Karma means causality. Everything is following a causality. They are creating the bondage. The deeper meaning, I will come into it. Now, the leaves, they are saying leaves are the Vedas. One thing is that the leaves help us to identify the tree. Is it not? From the leaves we identify the tree. So Vedas are actually telling us everything about our creation, our life and everything. So on one hand, they are enabling us to identify who are we and what is this world. That is why he says Chandamsi Yasya Parnani. Another thing is that these leaves, they are surviving with the sap. That is, through the mula the sap is coming, is it not? And if the light and air is not there, will it survive? The whole tree is surviving again because of the leaves. The leaves are drawing from both sides. They are drawing the light and air, oxygen from the air, surrounding air, and it is drawing the sap coming through the mula also. The sap coming through the mula is its anchor, that Purusha identity. Although it is living with the external circumstances, everything. So it is a fusion of the creation as well as the Purusha and Prakriti. So the Vedas are telling us that although we are playing in this created world, the real sap is the Purusha. That is our real identity, the consciousness within us. Without that, we will not survive. And that is the essence of our life. Although the life is stabilized and is functional with all the surrounding world around us. Now, why did they say that the mula is upward? Here we have to take to some experiential. See, whatever is subtle, whatever is higher, we always refer to as upward. Is it not so? Even heaven we think it is upward and the hell is downward. In yoga also, you will find that any elevating experience, when we have it is always an upward movement, pulling upward. Because downward is our gravity. Downward attraction is always tying us with the inert objective world. And all our sensory provocations and sensory impulsions, they are all downward. Whereas when we want to lift ourselves from the sensory indulgence, you will find we have that upward movement. Particularly those who have meditated or practiced yoga, they mention about Kundalini. Now Kundalini is not anything like as we often misunderstand. But the fact is that Kundalini Tattva, that subject of Kundalini, they represent some experiential result. When we practice yoga, we find a sensation or a force moving upward from the navel region towards one after another. And why are the different chakras? There we have a special sensation. One day you may have from here, suddenly you feel a melting in the heart. So there is a chakra here. You feel a special sensation of nectar falling in at the throat. Another chakra. You may find a light at this point and you get dissolved in the light. So many experiences can be there. It is a chakra here. Finally, they call it Sahasrara chakra, which is the Sushumna, that end of the Sushumna Nadi. This Nadi also in Yoga Shastra, they are the carrier of experiences. In Kathopanishad, I said the other day that it is towards the end, it is saying that there are 101 Nadis, of which one is going to the Sushumna. Now 101, it may not be, numeral may not be true. There are so many Nadis going to different sides. One is only going towards Sushumna. That is the important point there. all the nadis, nerves, what are they doing? They are all getting all the experiences of the world. All the perceptions, the electrical pulses are passing through our nerves. In Nadi, we may not know about electrical pulses or anything, but Nadi refers to the carrier of experience, world experience, from the sense organ to the brain, to our mind actually. In Yoga Shastra, we'll say to our mind. The formations are taking place in our mind, and all are coming from the different sense organs. Through the Nadi, they propagate. Now, one Nadi through Sushumna, we say that in Yoga Shastra, we say that when we leave our body with the concentration on the Sushumna, then we get liberated. Actually, we get liberated before the body falls. If we can focus our attention to the point here, the Sahasrara, after some time you will get a great release where you will not have the body sensation. It's a bodiless experience. So as the brain is creating the body experience, the same brain can create bodiless experience also. Don't assign any mysticism to that. The brain is giving us, the mind is giving us the sensation of the body. That same mind can create bodiless feelings also. The same brain can create bodiless feeling also. If we could measure with some instrument the signals here, I am sure that we will be able to identify what are the signals at that point. It must have some replica in the brain. Our Sharira or Deha, the word means the seat of experience. So whatever experiences we have, it will definitely have a stamp in our corresponding some signal in the brain. That is how it is getting stamped in the memory. Suppose you had the Samadhi experience sometimes. Whatever means at that time world is not there, you are not there, no individuality is there, no signal is there. But that no signal state we will be able to point out. When we are deep sleep or we have become unconscious, is it not shown in the brain? That particular wave there, we will be able to identify that it is unconscious state. If it is not fully, science will improve and it will be able to do. So everything will have a stamp there. Now here I wanted to say that all the elevating movement we have, which is taking us away, extracting us from the slavery to the world, slavery to our indriyas, our sense perceptions, they are all upward movement. And they are taking us to the ultimate, the freedom in the Brahman or Atma or the consciousness, you can say. That is body feeling, the gross feelings, from the gross perception to the subtlest perception, it is an upward movement. So naturally, the moola for our body is upward. Can you show that now? I think you have it. I have tried to put a human body and the tree in the reverse form. How much it will be representative, I don't know, but let us see. It is not Ashwatha, because from the internet we could get only this tree there like this. But I have not put the leaves there. We wanted a tree without the leaves to have the replica of, to have the comparison with the human body. In human body, the moola is upward in the Sahasrara, cerebral part. From there, all the nerves are coming down. Exactly similarly in the tree also, all these are coming down with the moola. Tree means in the inverted tree. The moola is upward. So, they have conceived of it, the inverted tree, to give us that feeling of the upwardness of the ultimate realization or truth. That it is from our main link is with the Purusha. And all other worldly link are coming down and getting into that. That is the Ashwatha picture. Now I will try to develop it further next day with the details of the Ashwatha tree. Let us see what happens. As I told you that it is very difficult to relate these to the experiences and the sadhana, because they are basically dealing with the philosophy. And lot of Vedic concepts are involved here. They are taken from the Vedas, Bhagavad Gita has incorporated. It is there in Kathopanishad also, but it is there in the Vedas.